An electric motor is designed to use the idea of electromagnetic force on a wire that carries an electric current to get a periodic repeated rotational motion, using a coil of many turnings instead of a single push on a straight wire. The main parts of a simple basic electric motor are: the first part is this part which performs the rotational motion. It's a coil of many turnings. Connected to both ends of the wire of the coil are two C-shaped, or you can say two separate metallic half circles named the commutator. The two halves of the commutator slip on two smooth fixed parts. These two parts are directly connected to the poles of the battery and are named the carbon brushes. The whole system gets the electric energy from a DC battery or a DC power supply, and without the two poles of the magnet, there will be no force. According to our syllabus, you need the answer to 3 questions about the electric motor. The first question is, how can we draw a simple labeled diagram of a simple DC motor? The second question, how can we decide if the coil will rotate clockwise or anti-clockwise direction? And the third question, what is the rule of the commutator and why do we need to reverse the current each half cycle? The answers of these 3 questions are exactly what we need to know about the electric motor. Now the first question, how to draw? A 3D electric motor is hard to draw on a plain paper. Now we need a simple way to draw all the parts. We start by drawing the two poles of the magnet. Then between them, we draw the basic rectangle that represents the coil. We can draw more rectangles on the first one to give the effect of many turnings. Then 2 lines are drawn out of the coil. They represent the 2 ends of the wire of the coil. Attached to these ends, we will draw the 2 C-shaped parts, which are the 2 halves of the commutator, and then 2 black-colored T-shaped carbon brushes. Do not forget the connection wires and the DC battery or the DC power supply. This is a simple way of how to draw a simple diagram of the DC motor. The first step to know the direction of rotation of the coil, we must show the direction of the electric current correctly in the wires of the circuit, starting from the positive pole and ending with the negative pole of the battery. Sometimes the direction of the current is directly given in the question. Among all these wires in the circuit, the only 2 parts that are responsible for the rotational motion of the coil are those side wires of the coil, and they are what we will concern about. Now look at the side wire on the right. By applying Fleming's left-hand rule, the first finger shows the magnetic field from north to south, which is from left to right. The second finger shows the direction of the conventional current from positive to negative, which is for this part into the page. According to the directions of the magnetic field and the electric current, this side will be pushed with a force downwards, as shown by the thumb. Applying the same rule on the other side of the coil on the left, this wire will be pushed upwards. By combining the 2 sides together, this will clearly show that the coil as a whole will rotate in a clockwise direction. Now another example after reversing the battery. Remember again, the first step to know the direction of rotation of the coil is to know the direction of the electric current, starting from positive pole and ending with the negative pole of the battery. You also have to remember that the only 2 parts that are responsible for the rotational motion of the coil are those side wires of the coil. Now look at this side wire on the right. By applying Fleming's left-hand rule, this side will be pushed upwards, as shown by the thumb. Applying the same rule on the other side of the coil on the left, this wire will be pushed downwards. By combining the 2 sides together, this will clearly show that the coil as a whole will rotate in the anti-clockwise direction. To study the mechanism of the electric motor, we need to have a detailed study of one complete cycle, especially what happens in the side wires of the coil, as the side wires are the parts of the coil that are completely responsible for the motion of the coil of the electric motor. To have a detailed study of one cycle, we need to have a front view of the electric motor parts. For more clear study, let us give colors to the halves of the commutator. One half is red and the second half is blue. Remember, These colors are just to study. This is a simple colored diagram of the front view of the electric motor. One carbon brush is connected to the positive pole of the battery. The other carbon brush is connected to the negative pole of the battery. This is how the coil will make one complete cycle. For more and more details, let us study one half of the coil, the red half. For this part of the coil, to make a complete cycle, it first must be pushed down for the first half cycle. Note, a half cycle it will be pushed down. To complete the cycle, the half coil must be pushed upwards, so the direction of pushing must be reversed. Note, and the second half cycle, it needs an upward push. Now let us have more details. As the side of the coil enters the magnetic field of the magnet, according to Fleming's left-hand rule, the side will be pushed down. And due to the mechanical design of the electric motor, the push takes the shape of a half circle. Now the side is in the lowest possible point and no current flows, because the commutator now is not in contact with any of the two carbon brushes. Even there is no current and no force now on the side wire, it still have a push by inertia to get again into the magnetic field, and the commutator touches the other carbon brush. Now comes the problem. If both magnetic fields and current remain unchanged, the side wire will be pushed down according to Fleming's left-hand rule. And this is exactly what you do not want to see, because the side will stay at the bottom of the cycle and will not complete the cycle. Now in this position, you need an upward force. To get this upward push, you have either one of two options. Option number 1, reverse the magnetic fields by switching the positions of the poles. Option number 2, reverse the direction of the current. The easier is option number 2, and it's to reverse the current, and soon we will know how. Note, now the direction of pushing must reverse to be upwards instead of downwards to complete the cycle. As current is reversed, magnetic field remains unchanged. The direction of force on the wire will be reversed according to Fleming's left-hand rule shown. So the cycle completes and the side wire is now at the top. In this position, we want to have the downward push again. It is clear that each half cycle, the direction of pushing must be reversed. So there must be a mechanism that reverses the current each half cycle. So the question will be, how can we reverse the current each half cycle? The answer is the commutators. Now let us study another cycle from another point of view. The side will start a new cycle. Have a look inside the square. This half of the commutator touches the positive carbon brush, which is in contact with the positive pole of the battery. When the side wire is at the bottom, there is no contact with any of the carbon brushes and no current. As the second half of the cycle starts, the same half of the commutator is now in touch with the negative carbon brush, which is connected to the negative pole of the battery. This is how the current is reversed each half cycle inside the coil. Note, each half of the commutator switch positions on the carbon brushes, and this happens each half cycle. The same thing happens to the blue part of the commutator, keeping the coil in continuous non-stopping rotational motion. Many changes can cause the coil to rotate faster. First, we can use stronger battery or use more cells to increase the current in the coil. Actually, any means of increasing the current will cause faster rotation, like using wires of lower resistance. We can also increase the strength of the magnetic field by using a stronger magnet, for example. Any other method of increasing the magnetic field strength, like moving the poles closer to each other, will do the same effect. Sometimes increasing the number of turnings of the coil is used to increase the rotation speed. A new method is to use an iron core for the coil. The presence of the iron core inside the magnetic field concentrates the magnetic field lines and causes faster rotation. To summarize these factors, number 1, increase the current intensity. Number 2, increase the strength of the magnetic field. Number 3, increase the number of turnings of the coil. Number 4, using an iron core. Summary and checklist. This checklist includes the titles of all points you need to understand in this lesson. Read the point. If you perfectly understand it, put a tick in the box. 4 main parts in this lesson. Number 1. Magnetic field of a wire with electric current. Number 2. Electromagnetic force on a wire. Number 3. Electromagnetic force on a charge, the electric motor. In the first title, magnetic field of a wire with electric current, you have to know the experiment that proves that there is a magnetic field for a wire that carries an electric current. Then you have to know how to draw the different shapes of the magnetic field. The last title is to decide the direction of magnetic field using grip right hand rule. If you understand these 3 titles very well, this means that you can go to the second part of the lesson. Electromagnetic force on a wire. You need to give the reason of the electromagnetic force on a wire. You must know the direction of pushing force on a wire using Fleming's left-hand rule. After that, you must know the factors that can increase the force on a wire. Finally, you must know the conditions that make no force on the wire even it has an electric current and it's situated inside the magnetic field. The third part is electromagnetic force on a charge. You must know the effect on a positive charge and the effect on a negative charge. These are the 2 titles in the third part. The fourth part of the lesson, which is the electric motor, you must know how to draw and label a simple diagram for the electric motor. You also must know how to decide if the electric motor is rotating clockwise or anti-clockwise direction. You must explain the rule of the commutator in reversing the current each half cycle. And finally, you must know the changes that can make the electric motor coil to rotate faster. If you understand these 4 points, then you understood the 4th point of the electric motor.